Thank you for joining me for another Quick Hits conversation. I'm Dr. Robyn. With me today, I have Connie Whitman, Pascal Derrien, and James Lee. And I want to ask the question, how do you keep yourself from being overwhelmed by strategy or process when you're trying to achieve a big goal? Connie, can you start for us?
So I really had to think about this because I have several, I think, safety nets in place, if you will, that keep me from going into that overwhelmed spiral. So first thing is I do have a project management system so that it's easy to delegate, track, and just see at a glance what's due, what the deadlines are, who's responsible for what. So there's clarity with the project. That's important. The other piece is I hired a VA last year, and she has been nothing but a lifesaver. I had the flu in October. I was down for about 10, literally down for 10 days. I've never been that sick in my life. She got my podcasts out. She knew where the drafts and what to send to the producer. And she just had everything done. I came back and no one knew I was out sick. And that was 10 days. So she just having someone that you really know, she knows her responsibilities, but she also knows what has to happen every day, every week. She had my back. And then the last piece for me is we're starting to create one of my coaches, she calls them super toolkits. They're like operating procedures on speed. So they're just living, breathing documents. So for my podcast, there's certain procedural things that I have to do week in, week out. We've put them in these super toolkits. So even if I'm out, the VA is out, who's ever covering, they have a to-do list literally organized as to what has to happen first, second, third. So being organized for me is kind of important.
Those standard operating procedures, absolutely.
Yeah.
SOP. Oh, okay. Well, I don't have any acronym for what I'm going to talk about. So for me, it's twofold. There's as an individual and as an organization. So as an organization, I agree with Connie. I think you need to delegate. And that's easy to a certain degree. You just empower and trust people and just give them clear objectives and they just reach that milestone. Speaking of milestone, personally, it's like running a marathon, which I do every now and again. I try not to think too much about visualize. I know people love to visualize. Me, I visualize small milestones. So I celebrate my small milestones. And I tend to put breakdown, just break down the whole thing into something which is consumable for my tiny brain. Otherwise, it gets overheated and I cannot deliver on stuff. So it tends to work for me. So I try to simplify the process and not let the occasions take over, whether it's actually an event, whether it's actually my organization objectives at the moment or anything else. Just put something which is achievable and which is humanly doable. When you do that, you find, and you know me, I don't like to over-engineer stuff, but if you celebrate as well those milestones, you reach milestone 1, done, check, 2, 3, 4, you're going to get to 5, and then you can get champagne if you're doing champagne at the end. That's to work for me.
Yeah, I have a friend and colleague who lives in Germany, and she says, just shine the light at your feet and see the step you can take. That's what she says. But I feel like to do that, you have to have some kind of strategy that says, this is where I'm going. Because otherwise, if you only look at just this little piece, you won't really. So you have to build the strategy.
Yeah, because, I think you become tactical. But I think if you start to think strategically about tactical activities, then you're starting to empower stuff. Because people tend to be very binary, strategy versus tactics. No, it's the same thing. It's a different ecosystem. You approach things in a different way. It's a different narrative. But I think the key is to simplify stuff. Anyway.
Yeah. I think of strategy as what you initiate and tactics as how you respond, right? So that's how I make that distinction. But I'm sort of reminded of a indigenous saying that if you want to go fast, travel alone. But if you want to go far, then you have to bring your tribe. And I think Connie's built a very nice tribe of people to support her and the work that she does.
I think also to avoid that overwhelm is you have to notice when it's starting to happen. I think too many of us, especially those of us who are entrepreneurs or leaders, is we get into these places where we feel like we have to keep driving forward and we don't notice when we're getting overwhelmed, when we're burning out. And so how do you notice that? How do you notice when I'm getting lost in the strategy and the process and I'm not actually making ground?
For me, I I go down the rabbit hole and sometimes I don't come out because it's one more thing, get one more thing, but I'm just too driven. So my husband is the perfect, we're married 30 years. He is the perfect balance for me. He pulls me out when I don't even think I need to be pulled out. And I do.
And you respect him to allow him to do that. You don't fight him on it, which is a huge thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the sounding board is actually a pretty good tool. A sounding board is actually telling you to make a pause. You can stop stuff, regroup, revisit, and then, whether you're still on the right path or not. And then if it's not the right path, you just modify it, or you just kill the project altogether. We're all guilty of false great ideas. I have 300 per day, roughly. So I tend to drive my team nuts. And then you need to qualify it. And sometimes you already started something and you have not necessarily done the right level of work in terms of scoping and baselining. We all think it's a strategy as the ultimate goal, but to me, if you really mess up your scoping, you may end up working on the wrong project for the wrong reasons. So it's as simple as that,
Mm-hmm. And here in the States, I'm not sure if it's true worldwide, but we get into this thing where we're so busy driving that we forget that we may not want to go where we're going. And so being able to take that pause and not saying, oh, this is failure, I'm pausing, or I'm stopping, or I'm going to turn around, but to see it as a pivot. I think that's something that so many of us are not good at. We get so busy driving, we forget to pivot.
I think that comes with caffeine. It enables you to make more bad decisions faster and not realize why you're doing what you're doing. Because you're so focused on it, you don't realize that it may not be relevant at all times.
Mm-hmm. So
I fully agree with that, because I'm on caffeine until 12 and I switched to decaf after 2. And I'm do a way better job after 2, I have to say.
Interesting.
Hey, we're on something, James.
Yeah.
So we have this idea that you can not get lost in the details by just shining the light at your feet and taking this one little small step. But then I think what we're also saying is sometimes you have to bring out the spotlight and look at, are the small steps taking me where I actually want to go, or do I need to pivot?
I do that a lot, Robyn, actually. After a meeting, after I train, after at the end of the day, I try to pause and reflect. What worked? What didn't? Why did that work? Why didn't this work? Should I continue this? So try to reevaluate. Maybe I don't do it every day. I was
going to say every day.
I really don't. I probably do it weekly, but if I'm in a meeting and the meeting goes exceptionally well, I pause and I reflect. Wow, like I was in the zone, or why did that go so well? What did I say? How did I approach it? Did I organize it differently? If it's an epic fail, I do the same thing. Like, where the heck was my head today? What did I do wrong? Why did I do it that way? Why did I say that? So a lot of self-evaluation for me, because then I feel like you can nip it in the bud quicker, right?
Yeah. That's the difference between having the right answer and asking the right question.
Yes.
Right.
You're full of the one-liners today, Jim. I'm loving it.
I'm on a roll. Yeah.
He's caffeinated.
Guys, what about you? How often do you kind of take that pause and go, am I going where I want to go?
Oh, I always ask feedback, whether if it's in a team situation, I always close by asking feedback, just to make sure and recap that, whatever I'm actually first is actually what we're thinking collectively is okay. And then sometimes just to reassure me on my own sanity, but that's a different topic. But just to make sure that actually the feedback is good, is a good, not validation mechanism, but it's just good sense check, are we on the right track here? Because sometimes you get carried away with enthusiasm or whatever, and then you end up in rabbit holes for other reasons. But I think the feedback and the collaboration aspect is key to me, because you may have somebody who may take the lead on driving the overall project or an organization. However, it's always a team effort. So, for me, it's more important to have the team validation than just my own certainty about stuff.
Jim, what about you?
I like to do it at least once or twice a week, I would say,
Okay.
So, there's a difference between focus, which is getting things done, and then perspective. And that is looking at the really big picture. And as a futurist, I get to do that for a living, which is kind of cool.
That is kind of cool. Well, that is our 10 minutes. So I'm going to cut us off there. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me and sharing your tips and ideas about how to not get lost in the weeds, basically. I look forward to talking to each of you again really soon.